Hey, everybody. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of the Alex Hayes Podcast. I am your host, Alex Hayes. With me today is none other than Caitlin Penny from Copper Theory Creative. She is a marketing strategy. She is an expert at BS, which is brand strategy. And she is here to talk about all things brand and how it affects enterprise value. So with that, let's get into it. Caitlin, thanks so much for being here today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Alex. I appreciate it. I'm so excited.
Yeah, likewise. My pleasure. So for those of us that don't know who you are, go ahead and take a minute to kind of explain and introduce yourself and how you are where you are today.
Awesome. So, thank you so much again for having me. My name is Caitlin Penny. I am the CEO and founder of Copper Theory Creative. We're a brand strategy and design studio based out of Phoenix, Arizona, and we work with purpose driven brands who are worth being remembered.
I love it. I love it. And how long have you been doing this now?
It has been almost 10 years, if you can believe it, and I love every
10
minute of
years.
it.
Excellent. 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 And what kind of companies do you typically work with?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, we work with a lot of purpose driven. I used to think that not having a niche was a bad thing, but we're actually pretty generalistic when it comes to the industries. It's a lot of service based businesses, but we are very bold in the way that we do things and we are not apologetic in any way. So, as long as you're willing to take a stand and do the right thing and come out into the market guns blazing, we're ready to work as long as we do brand strategy first.
Excellent. Brand strategy. So when you say brand strategy, unpack that for us.
Sure.
Somebody that doesn't not familiar with it, unpack what brand strategy means.
I was hoping you'd ask me that. So, a great analogy that I always use is building a house, right? Alex, do you own your own house?
I'm a full-time RVer myself. So my wife and my
That's so
5 kids,
exciting.
yeah. We do own everything.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so this might be a little bit different than for you, but if you own a house or live in a house, the first thing that needs to happen is there needs to be a plot of land. Am I right? Second thing that
Correct.
needs to
Correct.
happen is you have to build a steady and solid foundation. That steady and solid foundation is your brand strategy. There's no point in building all the walls and figuring out what color the nursery is if you don't have a solid brand foundation. And so a lot of that comes into buyer's journey, who your customers are, the avatars within that. We talk about mission, vision, values, pillars, things like that. Those are a lot of pieces within brand strategy. We really want to know who you are and who the company is. And then that way, when we figure out, if you have buyers and shippers, how long does it take? There's so many different things that we need details on to build the big picture for the brand. And then we can, worry about going upstairs and knocking on social media's door or figuring out what the website should say. And when you don't have a brand strategy, that's when it gets a little dicey. And that's when everyone's posting just to post. Or, I heard that 3 times a week is a pretty good number, but it's really generalized content. So you're not disrupting anything. You're not making people stopping the scrolling that they've been doing for the past 2 hours. But if you have a solid and exciting brand that catches someone's eye, it's more likely for them to stop and say, okay, hey, I really relate to Alex. I wear hats like Alex. I live in an RV like Alex. And then that will enable them to take the next step in exploring what you offer. Because when it comes down to it, people are going to buy based off of emotion. So people buy based off of emotion and then justify it later. And so you have to have all of those little bitty pieces of the brand established before they even do anything, such as make a purchase or invest in your company.
I appreciate the analogy of building the house and the structure needed to create the image. Now, tell me though, what does brand mean as from a
Mm,
definition perspective?
sure.
Let's define terms to make sure everybody understands that we're on the same page. What is it by
Absolutely.
definition?
Sure. So branding is, well, just about everything when it comes to your company. Most people get sidetracked and think maybe it's just my logo. That's generally only the tip of the iceberg. Your brand is really the transformation that you're providing someone, the experience or the feeling that you bring to them. And when it comes down to it, the brand is what people believe in. And so you have to give them something to believe in order to take any steps in the right direction. So I usually say that branding is sort of the soul of the company and marketing is the personality, if that helps any.
It does. Is it fair to say that brand is a lot of reputation, right? Is
Mhm.
it fair to
Absolutely.
say that brand is corporate reputation
Mhm.
versus an individual reputation?
Sure. So you can actually go both ways on that. As far as a company or a business brand goes, yes, it is the reputation of the company. And what that means can be many things. It can be your systems and processes, it can be your customer service. But when it comes to a personal brand, you may be the face of the company. So, for example, I am the face of Copper Theory Creative, I am the founder of Copper Theory Creative. But if I wanted to, say, sell a business one day or set up the business to sell, you have to be able to differentiate personal versus business. So if you think about it long term, the business still has to run without you, but you're still trying to leave a legacy behind. So making sure that you don't necessarily have to be involved in every single thing from a personal branding standpoint is super important because you have a team that can also execute the rest of the services that you provide. However, you are the attention grabber when it comes to personal branding. But when it comes to the company, a lot of the times those pillars and those personal like core values, like you have core values as a person, they usually overlap with the business values, but it has to be very forward thinking in marketing and messaging. So that way, when you're looking to exit or sell the company, people aren't thinking that, well, it's going to disappear if Caitlin disappears, right? Because then that's translated to risk. And we don't want that because then your business valuation goes down. Throughout that process, we want to say, hey, this is the origin story. Caitlin, yes, is the origin story. This is how this company was built. But then look at all the great things that we've done since then. And since then we've evolved as a business as many many people involved instead of just one person doing things because then we can get people are going to buy you but you're not a solopreneur. Like this is money making business, right? So we have to make sure that everything, all the trust is there, but then the exit is where you get the real money, right?
I love how you're distinguishing the personal brand versus the corporate brand identity and that there's different relationship. Now, I think a lot of times people get lost though and they get stuck in the startup phase mindset where they are the business, right? Cuz I mean, if anybody's
Right.
starting anything, it's there is no separation between the business and the entrepreneur. They're one and the same, right?
Right, it lives in
Their
the
person,
founder.
it lives in the founder. Talk to us a little bit about the journey that the business goes through as it ages, and
Mm,
how do you start to distinguish and separate an origin story from the owner, and then how do you translate that using that as a foundation for storytelling and
mm,
relationship building, but then use that and still separate the owner and the business? It sounds like it's there's nuance there, but and it's very, but it's more identity stuff. So talk to us about how
mhm,
you process this transition from
sure.
early stage founder to seasoned business. Like,
Mhm.
walk us through this journey.
Sure. So as we mentioned, the personal brand really lives in the founder, right? You started this because you're passionate about something most of the time. You want it to be successful. We want it to be successful. Everybody wants to make money. So you are the sole provider of driving the attention to the brand. I could use myself as an example again and say that, I being the face of the company, I'm mostly responsible for speaking. I'm responsible for networking and creating leads. I'm also responsible for just fueling growth within the company because I'm not only the CEO walking around talking, looking cool, but I'm also managing a team that can deliver those specific services. So I'd go back to say, when I first started this company, I was 24 years old. I was a solopreneur who could graphic designs, do some graphic design and print your business cards, but I didn't have anybody else to rely on. So I was the company. I decided where I wanted to go with the company. Long story short, it was either a very familial type of feel or let's be Don Draper in a pretty, design agency walking around with all these important people around me. Ultimately, we picked the more familial side of things and it actually enables our company to work remotely across the country. But I knew that I needed help doing all of the things because you can't do all of the things as one person. And when it came down to it, we're a full fledged, all the services marketing agency. And so I don't have the time, if you think about it, to do social media, to do branding, to design a logo, to have the conversations, to make the sales, to do the networking, you kind of get what I'm saying there. And so I found the right team members. And I'd say building a team is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. But now I feel like I can say I have a great team who is great at everything they do. We have it sort of systematized and organized to where, no one's wearing 14 hats. There's an evolution of the company since 9.5 years ago. And you have to kind of see that. You have to plan ahead, because you don't want to be, or maybe you do, but most people don't want to be solopreneurs and do everything themselves forever. So, hiring a project manager, hiring a personal assistant, in addition to all the service providers and vendors that we have on the team, I was able to transfer my energy within the company. And when I say that, I mean, what is Caitlin completely needed for? What do you absolutely need me for in any process? I'll be there. What do you not need me for in every part of the process? I will not be there. But in the beginning of time, I was touching everything. And so it actually became a problem because I was bottlenecking everything. If you want to touch everything in your business and you can't outsource and you can't delegate trust and responsibilities, then you're not going to grow. You're going to hit a cap. You're going to hit a ceiling because you're taking up everyone's time if it comes, when it really comes down to it. And so when we started doing that, I'm now able to be a speaker. Now I'm able to do and be CEO, right? And when you're trying to build a company, there's that evolution that I mentioned that sort of starts happening to where my personal pillars in business also relate to within the company. So that's hiring internally. That's the clients that we work with externally. If they don't meet a certain vetting criteria, if you will, we're not moving forward, whether I'm hiring you or you're hiring me. And when that happens, it creates a stability, and you have to drive that stability within business, because it has to be designed to transfer, right? Like I'm trying to design this company to run on its own without me. But then we still need an origin story, as you mentioned. And when that origin story happens, that's a lot of the messaging. Like, where did you come from? What are you made of? People want to know that because it's a relatability factor and they're looking for something similar to themselves, right? Like, I'm known for wearing hats out and networking and speaking. So, number one, it's a great wayfinder at this point. But number two, it's part of my personal brand. People will come up to me and be like, "Hey, you're the girl from LinkedIn wearing the hats." And I'm like, "Yep, that's me." But that drives business. But on the back end of things, there are a lot of values that I'm protecting. And we live by that on an everyday basis, personally and in business. And so now, I mean, in a simplest form, I can go on vacation and not bring my laptop. But as the company keeps growing, people are now taking on more responsibilities, and there are more people on the team that can drive it. I'm not necessarily having to be a part of every piece of it. And so that becomes the conversions, they become better when we're working with people, because now more people are making sales. We're bringing more people into the company. Everybody knows what they're responsible for. And it sort of decreases that risk of saying, "Oh, well, Alex only hired us because he likes talking to Caitlin." Everyone lives by the same rules. So I hope that's making sense so far.
Yeah, so I'll put it in my own words so for
Sure.
context, right? So
Yeah.
you walked through the different various stages of business where you had startup,
Hmm.
solopreneur, and you have the building phase where you're starting to have more demand than you can handle alone, and then you start to
Hmm.
bring on team members. So you're building a small team, and eventually the team becomes self-sustaining, and then you start to remove yourself from being central figure inside the business and the actual doing. And then
Hmm.
eventually it's hopefully it gets to a point where that business and your team members are able to take control and be able to go through all the processes needed to run the business apart from you. You're still out there actively engaging with your audience, and you're not being lost as a public figure for your company, but you
Right.
are separating your reputation, right? Your personal reputation, and now there's starting to become a separation between who delivers
Hmm.
the product service to the end customer. Does this sound right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Put in the great words of Alex Hayes. Thank you.
I love it. I love it.
You kind of brought me through like my whole life in a way of business. So thank you for that. Yeah. And I think that instead of being the company, you need to feed the company. I guess I could add to
Yeah.
that. And then things start to get real. People still want to hear where you came from, what made this company to be, because if you think about the big brands out there, there's an origin story to how they all started. And if you have those really dedicated followers, they know that story and they're more than willing to preach it to everyone they know.
Okay. I love it. So let's talk about this then. How important is storytelling to
Mm.
brand, right? How important is that? And how do you do that successfully? And again, separating, doing it in a way that allows you to be who you are and express yourself, but then also make sure the business is expressing itself as its own entity. How how important is storytelling?
100%, 200%, absolutely the yes important. So obviously I'm on board for storytelling and it's very important, especially nowadays, because almost everyone's market is saturated at this point. So how do you stand out? And that's something that we help you figure out in brand strategy, because a lot of the times there's so many things going on, especially after a 10-year company, that, I kind of say that the inside of my head sometimes feels like a pinball machine where all the balls go off at the same time. And you're like not sure which lever to hit now. um, Storytelling is super important because number one, people want to see the real you. We have AI, we have the internet, we have social media, we have all these things that distract us 24/7. But people still crave the human touch. And if you're able to tell a story well, it really resonates with people and they will not forget it. And that's going to be the reason that they make a purchase. And a lot of people are scared to be on video and don't know how to tell their story. And that's why you should hire a brand strategist. And it really makes an impact on the people who follow you. It really tells a story of the transformation that you provide, but it also, in its simplest form, shows your authenticity. And I realize that authenticity is a giant buzzword at this point. But if people can tell you that you're not being genuine or you're uncomfortable in the words that are coming out of your mouth, they're going to see right through you. And then your story's killed
Mm,
instantly. So there's a story to every company, every brand, how it came to be, whether you like it or not. And same thing with personal brand, right? It's you have one, whether you like it or not. It's just how you craft it. The messaging is super important because people, again, want something to believe in. And when it comes to storytelling, people want to hear the legacy. People want to know how hard you're working because are working super hard. They want to know it's possible. And so if you can tell stories also about your clients or something that you were able to do within the business, whether it was some sort of charity arm to the company or the transformation of a very successful client that you provided or helped them um, to be, it really just makes all of the difference. Because if you go online and you type in marketing agency, you will get a billion hits on Google. But if there's no face, there's no personal touch, you feel like a robot's talking to you and it was written by ChatGPT instead of Alex's personal story, it's going to be easy for them to pick because they're always going to pick the human touch side of things.
that's powerful. Now, I want to ask you this question too, because I think we've talked a lot about what branding is, but
Mhm.
what do you see as the way people think or way business owners think that they think it is, but it's not?
Most people think a brand is your logo, and that's it.
Okay. It's just the logo. That's all I think it is.
That is it, yes. And so I used to do a talk on your visual brand, right? And it was not the brand overall, but it's where a lot of people start when they're in startup mode. People get a little overwhelmed with how pretty it is, how perfect it has to be. They don't actually think about the profitable side of things. I always talk about pretty versus profitable. From a visual standpoint, yes, there needs to be consistency. Yes, you should have some brand guidelines that you live by instead of picking which font to use on TikTok today, right? But it's going to evolve just like you do as a business owner. So I'm not saying that it's not important because it definitely is. But if you don't step into the brand strategy side of things first, it's just a logo and it's not really
Yeah.
speaking for you. It's not really doing anything for you. But people like to launch off that because they want to show something. They want to show it's legit. And It's exciting. Don't get me wrong. It took me 4 months to design my logo. I get it. But it's not everything, because if you don't figure out those core values or those core pillars, or what your tagline should be going through this entire strategy process, that's when people start creating logos on Canva. Hit me, please. But they're pre-generated. They don't mean anything, and they're
Yeah.
standardized, and it doesn't make you stand out. People don't understand what you do. And then you're sitting there wondering, like, why isn't this working? Same thing for like a website. We actually moved the company, the business model, I'd say, into more brand strategy focus, because I had a lot of people coming to us with the same, that resulted in the same pattern. And that pattern was, thanks to the logo, okay, bye. They would go out of business or never actually start, because they were so focused on how pretty everything looked that they didn't have any back end processes or systems, nothing to stand for. They don't know what services they're selling, nothing systematized or documented. And they don't know how to actually run the business. And so you get too held up and hung up on the pretty stuff, but there's no substance behind it. The same thing for a website. I would get people say, "Hey, Caitlin, can you design us a website?" And then I get a call 30 days later saying, "Why are we not millionaires yet?" And I'm like, okay, that's not how this works. So when it comes down to it, you can be super pretty, but then not be delivering anything. And so why don't you figure out the brand strategy first and then say, well, the logo should really be orange instead of pink, because our audience wants to be energized and we're not maybe targeting only women. And so that's not the first impression we want to make. But you don't know those things until you go through that process.
I think this is a good segue here, because let me ask you this. When you are designing a brand strategy, what are the pillars that
Mm.
support your brand strategy, and how do you go about crafting and creating one for your clients?
Sure, sure. So this is our favorite part. We love a good workshop. We have what's called the brand spark session, and that is exactly the brand strategy system that we build. And within every client and process that we work within, this is basically what it comes down to. Yes, number one, mission, vision, values. Number two, the demographics, target market, and the avatars that live within that. Number three, what makes you different? What is your unique value proposition? And what are the differentiators that you can show in the market that make you look different than the other company that's standing right next to you that does the same thing? I also explore personal brands. So if you want to be the face of the company, you have to know why and what things to focus on. Part of this workshop is me not trying to change who you are as a company or a person, but it's my job to give you the confidence to step into the shoes that you already own, just a matter of how and when. So AKA, what are those talking points that we need to focus on? Because your brain does feel like a pinball machine. And then we explore social media, we explore goals, there's so many things that we can do, but we want to get the entire story of the business and the person. So all of this happens within a half day workshop. And basically, it's pretty similar to a podcast. You and I would just talk for a few hours, have some food, get a drink. But in all seriousness, we sit there, record, gather all of the information. Then, based on those goals, we'll reverse engineer everything and say, hey, based on what you've got or what you were able to provide, here are the missed opportunities or the holes that we see. And then if you want to accomplish this, you have to do X, Y, and Z to get there. And then we establish timelines and deadlines and just see what's working and what's not. So I know that was a mouthful, but basically when it comes down to it, we ask you a lot of brand focused questions. You answer them being open and candid and willing to have the conversation. And that's what we need to really do vision building for you. And then that might sprout into things like the buyer's journey. And if we have to deal with shipping and manufacturing, those are all different workshops we can break out into. So I hope that gives you kind of like a big picture.
I love it. Yeah. So mission, vision, values, you said
Hmm.
was pillar number one. Number
Yes.
two was your ICP, internal
Hmm.
customer profile or avatar profile, whichever your language
Correct.
you prefer. Third was your story. You said was your story and
Hmm.
the why and how you got to where you at today. You said the fifth one was your what you do.
Yep.
Did I miss any?
Services, differentiators.
Differentiator. What you do and
Yes.
how it's different. Yeah, what you do and
Yes.
how it's different in the marketplace.
And then we also split that up or divvy that into goals. So based on all that stuff, what are the goals that you really want to accomplish as a business? And then we figure out how to do all of it.
you have a so essentially you have a 6-step process that you walk people through that
Yep.
helps them go from not knowing what brand is to crafting a brand narrative. Now,
Yes.
once you have all that information, what's the best thing for the people to do with that information? So you create this story, but what's is this is this what people call brand book?
Sure. So all of this information is then gathered on the back end, and we will make a plan for you. So we create a roadmap or a marketing strategy. All of that really just it's more than a brand book. So I would say, if we're getting technical, you can have like a visual brand guide and then like a brand guide to follow as far as the company goes. So if you mash both of those together, it's visual and content, so the good stuff.
Mhm.
But then it's something it sort of serves as a document to steer you in the right direction. So to help you or enable you to make data-driven decisions. So instead of being tactical with all the marketing things, I talked to a person recently. She's my old business coach. She calls them Insta tactics. So instead of trying to do all the things on social media and write this and do that, and we'll test and see if this works out, we take all the information that we've gathered from you in this initial workshop and say, hey, this is the best road to success. Don't worry about this parking lot, that. And then these are the things that absolutely need to happen for you to reach your quarterly goal. So, long story short, it's more than a book. It's more, well, yeah, I guess it is a book. It's a book of your business.
I love how once you have source documents, you're able to basically be so much more consistent in your messaging, and that
Mhm.
consistency is what builds reputation. And
Absolutely.
I think that that's the big thing that I think a lot of people miss is just consistency of messaging because everybody's like you're saying it, the insta tactics, right? Everybody wants to grab on,
Mhm.
this trendy thing or do this thing. And,
Yep.
to some extent it may work for a brief moment, but brands are built over decades. And
Right.
every successful business owner that's been in business multiple decades already has built a brand, but helping them articulate that brand and separate it from their identity as a person is
Mhm.
is where enterprise value can really be added, right? So
Absolutely.
we started talking about this, but I want to go back to this. At what point in the business journey does not having a brand strategy become quiet risk built in?
Okay, yeah, I would say your business starts and ends with your brand, and that happens in a couple of different ways. So when you start the business, it is very important to establish brand and what you're trying to accomplish and the services that you provide. Otherwise, you're confusing your audience. And so you have to be very concise in that messaging that makes people believe in this new thing that is happening. There's a lot of trust that comes into that, and you don't quite have the reputation built. So you need to build something. And that usually comes within the branding. That way, you know exactly how to talk about it in any situation, like networking or on stage. And it's very concise. You should also be able to hand that brand guide or book to someone and they know exactly what to say and how to describe your company. Otherwise, it gets confusing because if you think about it and you share something on social media and then somebody else does it too, you don't know exactly what you're looking at or the message you're spreading. In the beginning, to be very concise about everything is super important to start building growth. And then as your company evolves, say we're in the 10-year mark, it's important to also revisit that and make sure everything's still on par because it probably evolved since day one. And then when you get to, say, exit planning, you want to make sure that you're leaving a legacy behind. And depending on how involved you want to be in the company still, you have to make sure that those brand pillars are established because people will see a shift happening. And if you're exiting as the CEO and you're the face of the company and that's why you gain a lot of business still, you're going to lose clients because the risk is you're disappearing. And so there's a sweet spot and there's not exactly a timeline because I know that exit planning is a little dicey when it comes down to that, but there's a moment where you have a plan. Say it's, you're 5 years, 10 years out. You have to start checking all the boxes as far as branding, saying, hey, if Caitlin's exiting the company, what were the brand pillars that supported her? Why did people invest in this company? What is happening to where people are gravitating towards her and she was able to make the sale? I'm not going to be the salesperson anymore. So then how do you take that information and craft it in such a way that it's repeatable? And then also be able to tell your audience, your followers currently, and then anybody new saying, hey guys, everything's cool. Caitlin's awesome still, but she's exiting. How do we make this an easy transition is to keep people involved. So don't just one day say, surprise, we're not the CEO anymore. No, we're going to say, hey, this is the plan. They don't need to know every detail, but we still live by X, Y, and Z pillars. This is our promise to you. This is what we will still continue to do while preserving the legacy of the CEO. And the legacy of the CEO is this. So then you take that storytelling piece that you mentioned earlier and say, hey, this is the origin story. This is how we came to this point. That way, again, it's something that people can relate to or look up to or aspire to be. And then say, hey, we're protecting you. We still got your back. It's kind of like maybe a new person, but the same old delivery, the same style, the same thing you've had since day one. None of that's going away. And so a lot of that has to do with the messaging and your conversations and the reputation you've built since CEO started the company to CEO exit the company. So I guess I can't tell you an exact date or timeline of that, but you have to start. Brand strategy should be present in every conversation. Long story short.
So the best time to start a brand strategy is from
No.
inception of the business.
You're right. Yes.
The second best time to start strategy is as soon as possible today.
Right. Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. I like how you're summing this all up for me. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. That's what I'm here. So I think that's a great take. I like how you were explaining that the process of exiting and keeping customers. Because so in the exiting process, there's a big risk. Like one of the risks for the
Hmm.
buyer, right, is after you leave, many customers, current customers, are going to leave because now the founder's out of the picture. Right? That's a risk to a buyer every time somebody buys a small business. Big risk.
Hmm.
And what you were describing are some practical evolutions or practical steps that owners can take today to help mitigate that risk. And when you mitigate a buyer's risk, you're actually raising your own enterprise value at the same time.
Yes.
So, because the lower risk you profile you have to a buyer, the higher valuation you can demand in the marketplace because you're a
Hmm.
better bet, right? And that's what this all comes down to, practically speaking. And
Hmm.
and so I like how you were explaining that as you are as you were building and getting ready and preparing yourself and having this conversation that you're being, open and honest with your customer base or your client base, right?
Hmm.
And I think it depends also on what kind of customer or kind of client they
Sure.
have, right? If it's a service-based business, it's an intimate relationship and it's built on relationship, maybe you want a little bit more. But if it's a product-based business and you're just, servicing or providing widgets, maybe it's not
Hmm.
as important to have that conversation. But I really appreciate you giving that clarity of here's a practical way that you can step out gradually without having a big shock to a reputation
Hmm.
of the business itself.
Yep. It's not about just posting a piece of paper on the wall and saying, here are our core values. Those core values should be lived by every day. And that way, people know that we're not erasing the founder. Those values came from the original founder. And now we're just continuing that. And you're in trusted hands.
Yep, absolutely. What is one of the best examples of branding, corporate branding, that you can point to as an example? And it could be public company, it could be small business, anything. But what's a good example that you can use to help explain and clarify what a good brand is?
Ooh, so many good ones. Okay. Let me think of my favorite brand. It's a loaded question, sir. So let's go with something that everyone knows. Let's talk about the Apple brand. That's an easy one. The legacy of the brand was built by Steve Jobs. The original logo was 1976. That's when it all started. Fun fact, the original logo was black and white. It was almost like a line of cut art, if you know what that is. It's just black and white drawn, stamp sort of look to it, and it was Isaac Newton sitting under an apple tree. And that was the Apple company logo, is what it said in a banner underneath. It was very old school. The origin of that story, well, Isaac Newton. Alex, do you know who Isaac Newton is?
Yes, I know who Isaac Newton is.
Okay. Okay. And how would you describe Isaac Newton to anyone?
He's a pretty smart dude.
Okay. Great. Yes, that's a good start. So that smart dude was also an inspiration to another smart dude named Steve Jobs. Okay. And so he took that, became innovated with the Apple, he wanted to create innovation with Apple products. So it was built for a lot of creative people, a lot of people who started their businesses as graphic designers, a lot of people who wanted the latest and greatest technology. But he was also in the public. So he was public facing. And so his image, whether you're a fan or not, right? Like you know who he is, right? Most people can even identify him in a crowd if they needed to. But he's, the skinny guy with the glasses and the jeans, right? Or at least I do. But public facing, and they do the Apple product rollouts every year, and he's always in the news, and there's a lot of PR based around him, but also the innovation of the company and the technology of the company. There's always updates. You're always hearing something new. I mean, we're on iPhone 17 at this point. There's a vibe, and
Yeah.
that vibe is, hey, we want the latest and greatest. We are creatives. Everything's clean and slick, so it appeals to a certain audience. It's supposed to be the best technology and do all the best things. And so he would explain all of that, and then there would be evolutions of the product that you could purchase. But on the back end too, it wasn't just about Steve Jobs. It wasn't just about the product, but it was also about education. And if you think about that, Steve Jobs is the personal brand, so the face of the company, and people love him or hate him, and there are reasons why. You have to take a stand for something, even if people don't disagree or people don't agree. And when you take a stand for something, then you create that following and that audience that will never, ever go away. I've had an iPhone since I don't know, inception of smartphones. And I do have the latest and greatest model. And now I can't go away from it because I've got the laptop and the iPad and the AirPods and the Apple Watch and everything's synced, right? And so I'm now a loyal follower. Whether that was him or the product itself, I have something to believe in and to rely on. He also used education as a pillar. So now things are always being updated. There's always a new version of something that enables you to do something even better within your company. And then, the iterations of the logos, for example, of Apple, there's like 10, 15 of them. And so they pay attention because they have to over time of what people respond to, what kind of following we have. And there's so many different brand pillars that you're either for it or you're against it. And I think that's pretty strong when it comes to a successful brand because they've been around since 1976 and they're not stopping, even though Steve Jobs is obviously not the CEO anymore. The new CEO is continuing the legacy, not exactly the most public facing person compared to Steve Jobs in my personal opinion. Like he's just not as out there as much. But nothing's changed in the company. And if there are changes within the company, we all know about it. It's definitely in the news. And so I guess to end all of that, I think that Apple's a successful product, whether you love it or hate it, because they established their target market. They had brand values. They had a face of the company. They were successfully able to take that legacy and continue it after he exited. And then it's still happening. You're still selling products, there's still sales, and it's still something that people live by. And I think ultimately when you're building a business or a company, you have to keep you have to keep that in mind. Like you want your product or service to be a household name, and it definitely is.
That's a great example. Yeah, Apple's a great example. The one that always comes to my mind is Chick-fil-A. I like
See? Yes. Yeah.
Chick-fil-A. I mean, they have such a strong brand identity from
Mhm.
a corporate brand. But nobody goes to Chick-fil-A because they're a fan of Dan Cathy anymore, right?
Right.
I bet
Yep. Yeah.
most people don't even know who Dan Cathy is.
Right. Yes. And so
You
there had
know?
to be some PR around that too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
I think
everybody
these are
knows
great.
knows it.
Yeah, they
Mhm.
know it and they know what it stands for. They know what
Mm,
it's about, and the business
mhm.
has its own identity.
Right.
It's kind of a weird it's a weird thing when a business kind of takes over its own identity because it's a
Sure.
non-living thing that all of a sudden
Mm,
is a person and
yep,
both legally and publicly it's a real person by itself. And it's made up
yep.
of yeah, it's made up of the cast of characters that make it operational.
When you think about it too, that's where the personal brand and the business brand overlap, right? So we all know Chick-fil-A, but we also know that they're closed on Sundays. For that reason, it's religious purposes by the original owners, and that is not going away. And they treat everyone with respect, and they say it's my pleasure, right? After you order a chicken sandwich, that's what I and there's cows, right? But it all originated, I believe, on a farm, right? That was their life, if I'm not mistaken. But those tiny details are overlapping even though they don't know who Dan Kelly is.
Yeah, Dan Cathy, yeah.
Or sorry, Dan Cathy, yeah.
And I think that to me, having a business that takes on a life of its own is one of the most amazing things possible. It's almost like
Mhm.
giving birth to a child. It's not as
Right?
good. I'm not gonna
That's
put
true,
it
my
at the
business
same
is my
level.
baby, yep.
Yeah, but in a lot of aspects, in a lot of ways, it's the most artful way of being creative
Mhm.
as in expressing your own creativity because you are literally creating something out of nothing. You're creating something of
Definitely.
value
Mhm,
that did not exist before, and that's
mhm.
amazing to be able to do that and to do it successfully, right? And then especially to be able to walk away from it just like a parent as you build that child's identity is wrapped up in you as a
Yes.
father. For me, it's father or mother, my wife, but our children right now, their identity is wrapped up in who we are as parents.
Mhm,
But as it matures into adulthood, our kids are taking on their own identity and they're figuring out who
mhm.
they are and what they like to have and what they like to be and who they like to hang out with, right? They're creating their own story. And then when they do enter the workforce or they do enter into the real world, outside of our protection as parents, now they get to decide where they go from here, right? What options and
Absolutely.
what value they're going to do and what creative solutions they're going to
Mhm,
come up with. And it's all new and it may be
mhm.
different than the original founder, right? It may be different than me being their dad. Like I may have made different choices, right? They're hopefully they'll make better choices than I made when I was just getting out of college. But at the same time, that's one of the beautiful things of life that we
Mhm.
get to witness is things take a life of its own and not being afraid of that and not being afraid of allowing what we've started and create to be able to move on beyond ourselves, right?
Mhm. Love
And
that.
I think there's something beautiful in that.
I love that.
So let's go ahead. I think this has been a great segment. I think we talked about a lot of
Yeah.
really important things. Let's sum up brand into a single first principle. Only one first principle. What do we boil down brand strategy to?
The transformation that you provide.
Okay, I like it.
Mhm.
Provide. That's what you become known for. You boil
Mhm.
everything down to information.
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
love
I
it.
think there's a lot of different steps that we take, before we get to that part, but we really have to know the answer to that before anything else can be established or we can see the importance.
I love that. I love it.
Mhm.
So with that, where can people find you, Caitlin?
Oh, well, you can find us at coppertheorycreative.com, all over Instagram and Facebook. You'll see me being on video and being weird. And I can just shoot us a message. Otherwise, come say hello and hello at coppertheorycreative.com. Thank you.
Awesome. I love it. And all of her links will be in the description below of this video. If you need help with brand strategy and you needs help from an expert that's been there and has done it multiple times for many other business owners, please don't hesitate to reach out to Caitlin Penny at Copper Theory Creative. So with that, Caitlin, thanks so much for being here. And everybody, we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you.